obeisances. Please accept my humble obeisances, all glory to Srila Prabhupada and Guru Maharaj. I'll start out with the prayers. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskrityam Naram Chevam Narotayam. Devi Saraswati Vyasam Tato Jaye Uddirahe. Nistyaprayeshu Adbeshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya. Bhakti Uttam Sloke Bhakti Bhavati Naistike. Today we're reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Cantos 8, Chapter 19. Lord Vamandev begs charity from Bali Maharaj. Text 1. Sukadev Goswami continued. When the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Vamandev, heard Bali Maharaj speaking in a pleasing way, he was very satisfied. For Bali Maharaj had spoken in terms of religious principle. Thus the Lord began to praise him. Text 2. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, O King, you are indeed exalted because your present advisors are the Brahmas, who are the descendants of Braja, and because your instructors for your future life is your grandfather, the peace and the Venerable Prahlad Maharaj, your statements are very true, and they completely agree with the religious etiquettes. They are in keeping with behaviors of your family, and they enhance your reputation. Text 3. I know that even until now, no one taking birth in your family has been poor-minded or miserly. No one has refused to give charity to Brahmanas, nor after promising to give charities has anyone failed to fulfill his promise. Text 4. O King Bali, never in your dynasty has the low-minded king been born, who upon being requested has refused charity to Brahmanas in holy places or a fight to Kshatriyas on the battlefield. And your dynasty is even more glorious due to the presence of Prahlad Maharaj, who is like the beautiful moon in the sky. Text 5. It was in your dynasty that Hiranyakasipu was born. Carrying only his own club, he wandered in the globe alone, without assistance, to conquer all direction, and no hero he met could rival him. Text 6. The dealings, the delivering the earth from Garbhadoshi, Lord Vishnu, in his incarnation of the boar, killed Hiranyakasu, who had appeared before him. The fight was severe, and the Lord killed Hiranyakashipu with great difficulties. Later, as the Lord thought about the uncommon powers of Hiranyakashipu, he felt himself victorious indeed. Text 7. When Hiranyakasipu heard the news of his brother being killed, with great anger, he went to the residence of Vishnu, and the, the killer of the brother wanted to kill Lord Vishnu. Text 8. Seeing Hiranyakasipu coming forward, bearing a trident in his hand, like a personified death, Lord Vishnu, the best of all mystic and the knower of the progress of future, though as follows. Text 9. Whoever so I go, Hiranyakashipu will follow me, as death follows all living entities. Therefore, it is better for me to enter the core of his heart, for then, because of the power to see only externally, he will not see me. Text 10. The Lord Vamandev continued, O King of Demons, after Lord Vishnu made his decision, he entered the body of his enemy, Hiranyakashipu, who was running after him, and with great force in the subtle body, inconvincibly to Hiranyakasipu. Lord Vishnu, who was in great anxiety, entered Hiranyakashipu's nostril along with his breath. Text 11. Upon seeing that the residence of Lord Vishnu was vacant, Hiranyakashipu began searching for the Lord here everywhere. Angry at not seeing him, Hiranyakashipu screamed loudly and search the entire universe, including the surface of the earth, the higher planet system, all direction, and all the caves and the ocean. But Hiranyakashipu, the greatest hero, did not see Vishnu anywhere. Text 12. Unable to see him, Hiranyakashipu said, I have searched the entire universe, but I could not find Vishnu, who has killed my brother. Therefore, he must certainly have gone to that place from which no one returns. In other words, he must now be dead. Text 13. Hiranyakasipu angrily anger against Lord Vishnu persisted until his death. Other people in the bodily concept of life maintain anger only because of false ego and the great influence of ignorance. Text 14. Your father, Varanako, the son of Maharaj Prahlad, was very affectionate towards Brahmanas, although he knew very well that it was the demigod who had come to him in the dress of Brahmanas. At their request, he delivered to them the duration of his life. Text 15. You also have observed the principle followed by the great personalities who are householder Brahmans by your forefathers and by great heroes who are extremely famous for their exalted activities. Thank you, Mataji. Hare Krishna. Thank you,
Thank you so
devotees.
much, Mataji, for reading translations today. Hare Krishna Chaitanya Das Prabhuji. Please accept our humble obeisances. All glories to Srila Prabhupada and Guru Maharaj. Please take over the call, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Radharani Mataji. Thank you, Atyalberi Shiladri Mataji, for reading our translations today. And thank you, dear devotees, for joining this Monday morning to hear something from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 8, Chapter 19. Chapter is titled Lord Vaman Dev Begs Charity from Bali Maharaj. I'll start by offering my prayers. Om Ajnantimirandasya Jnananjanashalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pristhaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Iti Namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्य देश तारणे जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधार श्रीवास आदि गौर भक्त वृंदा हरे कृष्णा कृष्ण कृष्णा हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे मुखं करोति वाचालं पङ्गुं लङ्घयते गिरिं यत्कृपातमहं वन्दे श्रीकृतेन्तारणं परमानन्दमाधवं श्रीचैतन्य ईश्वरम्. Hare Krishna, dear devotees. So we have seen in the past few discussions how in the sacrificial arena of Bali Maharaj, a wonderful personality who was more illuminating even than the sun appears. And as soon as the Brahmanas and Bali Maharaj himself, they see this wonderful personality, they can stop their sacrifices and they start offering prayers and glorifications to this wonderful personality. Bali Maharaj understanding him to be God. So after hearing all the glorification, now the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who appears in the form of a dwarf Brahmin or Vaman Dev, is going to respond to Bali Maharaj. And that is where the chapter begins today. Um, so in the first text, Sukdev Goswami goes on to say that when the Supreme Personality of God, Vaman Dev, he heard all the glorifications offered by Bali Maharaj, he was very satisfied. For Bali Maharaj had spoken in terms of religious principles. Thus the Lord began to praise him. The Lord understood, seeing the nature of Bali Maharaj, that he was his devotee. And he wanted to glorify him. And that's why we see this wonderful pastime that unfolds. Now the Lord wants to take an opportunity to glorify Bali Maharaj as well as Bali Maharaj's family. In this previous discussion, Bali Maharaj had said that he is most fortunate by the appearance of Vaman Dev, and he feels that because Vaman Dev had appeared, three things had happened. One is because he had stepped on this tract of land, this planet Earth had been sanctified. because he had an opportunity to associate and glorify as Supreme Personality of Godhead, Bali Maharaj himself had been purified. And he said his whole generation of families had also been purified. So just by appearance of the Supreme Lord, everything became pure. So in this particular way, he pleased the Lord, and the Lord begins to respond to him. In text 2, the Supreme Personality of Godhead said, he goes on to say that, O King, you are exalted because this sacrifice is being conducted by descendants of the Bhrigu Vansh. And because your instructor for your future life is your grandfather, who's the peaceful and venerable Prahlad Maharaj. So I think most of devotees may be familiar with it, but Bali Maharaj is the grandson of Prahlad Maharaj. And anybody who's associated with such a pure devotee as Prahlad Maharaj, it automatically becomes so dear to the Supreme Personality of God. So, even in his introduction of glorification to Bali Maharaj, Vaman Dev, emphasizes the fact that he is so fortunate to be related to such a wonderful devotee as Sri Prahlad Maharaj. Now, Srila Prabhupada writes in his commentary, in his purport, that one may think that devotees should not be attached to their family. Somebody might comment, "Oh, Prahlad Maharaj was attached to Bali Maharaj. How can he be such a Mahabhagavat? If he's attached to family." But in another lecture, I've heard from another wonderful Vaishnava that a devotee is not it's not a problem if a devotee is attached. It is common if we have feelings for our family members or for other devotees, to feel compassion for them, to genuinely express care and regard for them. So that being attached or being desirous of somebody's welfare is not a hindrance to bhakti. But what is a hindrance to bhakti is our over attachment to the family members or the loved ones, to the point that if we are over attached to them, we compromise our sadhana, we compromise our spiritual practice, then that becomes a hindrance. But if we are able to maintain our sadhana, maintain our spiritual practices, although in a particular way being affectionate towards our loved ones, then that is an expression of the natural compassion a Vaishnava has. Similarly, Sri Prahlad Maharaj, who himself was a Mahabhagat, and we know that in what trying circumstances he never gave up his bhakti. So how, even though he has his love and regard and attachment for his grandson Bali Maharaj, how would that affect his bhakti in any way? So with that particular understanding, Srila Prabhupada helps us understand that even though in a demoniac family with sort of associated with demoniac family members, both Prahlad Maharaj and Bali Maharaj were exalted devotees. Prabhupada also goes on to quote that just because somebody is in a particular family, we should not understand that they are not qualified to deliver or understand the depths of the Shastras. He quotes, Srila Prabhupada quotes from Chaitanya Charitamrita, Kiba Vipra Kiba Nashi Shudra Kena Noy, Jai Krishna Tattva Veda, Shai Guru Hoy. That one is not a Shudra, one is not a Brahmana, one is not a Vaishya, one only person who knows the tattva of spiritual knowledge can be a guru, no matter what birth he is in, no matter what background he is in from. So in that point, Srila Prabhupada says there's no point in questioning Sri Prahlad Maharaj, and Bali Maharaj association with Sri Prahlad Maharaj is most fortunate. In text 3, uh, Supreme Personality of Godhead goes on to say that I know that even until now, no one taking birth in your family has been poor-minded or miserly. So now the Supreme Personality of Lordhead is not only glorifying Bali Maharaj, but his entire clan. And he says in your entire generations that there have been such exalted kings who have been very charitably inclined, and they've always given charity to the brahmanas. They've always kept fulfilled the promise. So in a way, the Supreme Personality of Godhead is setting a premise for what's going to happen. He's going to ask Bali Maharaj for something which initially he very easily agrees to it, but later on when we see when that story unfolds and he's in a predicament, he wants to make sure Bali Maharaj doesn't get out of the predicament. So that's why he's setting a background to it, saying that nobody in your family has ever denied anything to the Brahmanas, and nobody has gone back on their promise of charity once they've given the promise. And a little bit later, we'll see that even Bali Maharaj's father, Virochana, his story comes very briefly about how he also was known to be very charitable. In text 4, we see that Lord goes on to say that, O King Bali, never in your dynasty has that low-minded king been born upon whose request the charity of the Brahmanas was refused, or nor did he refuse a fight to Kshatriyas on a battlefield. Now we see there's another principle that normally a Kshatriya should follow at least these two things. If any charity is ever asked of him, he should be ready to give that charity. Also, if there's any battle or any challenge that is offered to a Kshatriya, then the Kshatriya, being a true Kshatriya, is obliged to acknowledge that particular challenge. An example of this comes in the Mahabharata. So, once upon a time, what happens is when Duryodhana is upset, I believe it's day 8 or 9 of the battle, that even despite Bhishma Pitama's presence, the Pandavas are still making inroads into the Kaurava army, and they still, are defeating by huge numbers the Kaurava army. Duryodhan comes to this conclusion and accuses Bhishma Pitama that, because you are favorable to the Pandavas and partial to them, that is why you are not fighting properly. Otherwise, how is it possible that with you being the best warrior in this battlefield, our side is losing? So he's accusing Bhishma Pitama of bias. So in that particular scenario, then Bhishma Pitama takes a vow because he felt that he was challenged, like his Kshatriya nature was being challenged. So he takes a vow and takes 5 arrows and says, "Okay, with these 5 arrows tomorrow, I'm going to kill the 5 Pandavas." And then Duryodhan says, "Okay, that's fine, but you are very kind-hearted. So what if this arrows get lost or somebody takes it away from you? So better you give it to me for safekeeping, and tomorrow morning I'll give it to you." And then, obviously, Lord Krishna, knowing the entire plan, he informs Arjuna about it. And Arjuna approaches Duryodhana in the evening when the battle for the day is over and both camps are taking rest. And he approaches Duryodhana for the evening, and he approaches him in a very humble mood because he's going to ask for something. As soon as Duryodhana notices that Arjuna is going to ask for something, Duryodhana actually says, and this is where the example of charity for a Kshatriya comes. He tells Arjuna, "Arjuna, why are you here? Tell me. I'll give you anything you want. What do you want? Do you want the kingdom? Do you want the kingdom in charity? I'll give it to you." Before the battle, he was not even willing to give the 5 villages without a fight. But because this was Arjun was taking a lower position of being humble and asking for a charity, Duryodhana upheld the Kshatriya code and was willing to give him in charity even the kingdom. But obviously, taking the kingdom at that time would be an insult based on everything that had already happened. So Arjuna tells Duryodhan that I don't want the kingdom, I just want those 5 arrows in charity that Bhishma Pitama gave you. And Duryodhan was perplexed and he was like, "How did you know? There are only 2 people who know about the 5 arrows. It's me and Bhishma Pitama. So how did you know about it?" Arjun did not say anything, but obviously we know that the Lord present in everybody's heart guided Arjuna to take this charity from Duryodhana. But the point I'm trying to make here is that even a Kshatriya like Duryodhana upholds this principle of charity. And another place, a Kshatriya who cannot refuse a challenge on a battlefield or challenge in any other scenario is how Yudhishthira Maharaj got into trouble when challenged with a game of dice. He could not refuse because of the Kshatriya code. So in this particular way, the Lord is confirming and emphasizing the fact that make sure that you uphold this principle of charity to Bali Maharaj. Then the Lord goes on to describe. It's wonderful how the Lord is describing in such eloquent terms 2 great demons, both of whom the Lord had annihilated. The first one, I think in the commentary, Mataji was getting the pronunciation wrong, but the first demon is Hiranyaksh, who's the brother of Hiranyakashipu, and the second demon is Hiranyakashipu. So Hiranyaksh, we know from the story of Vara Avatar, how he had captured Mother Earth and taken her down to the nether regions and drowned her in this sort of material ocean. and how Varahadev comes and with his tusks he liberates Mother Earth back to her position, and then a great battle happens in which Lord Varaha delivers Hiranyaksh. But even though he was a particular enemy, the Lord in this particular situation, because if you see Hiranyaksh and Hiranyakashipu are like the great grandfathers of Bali Maharaj. So he is glorifying them and seeing their good qualities. And this is what we see from the Lord. The Lord, he's supremely good. So he sees only the good in any particular situation. We know from Krishna Lila itself that when Putana, desiring to kill the Lord, appears in front of the Lord, smearing her breast with poison. And there are different sort of commentaries on this by different acharyas. In one particular commentary that I've heard, when Putana appeared and saw the beauty of the Lord, at one moment, just for a flickering moment, she had this desire, oh, such a beautiful child. I wish I could give him my own breast milk. But being in that mode of passion and ignorance and the desire to kill Lord Krishna, she had smeared her breast with poison, and she was coming in a very attacking nature. But the Lord only took that flicker of moment of good intention that Putana had, and said, okay, I'm going to give you the position of my nurse in the spiritual world. So the Lord, even though he's fought and killed these two great demons, Hiranyaksh and Hiranyakashipu, in this particular episode, he's glorifying those two for their ability to fight such wonderfully, for them to be such good rivals, in a battlefield, and talks about the uncommon prowess of Hiranyaksh, that he really felt that this was a good battle worth fighting. So even in that particular situation, the Lord is able to see something good in them. We move on to text 9. After the Lord glorifies both Hiranyaksh and Hiranyakashipu, so what happens is when Hiranyakashipu, again we know from the story, I hope everybody gets a chance to watch this, the wonderful movie about Narsingadev. It's shown very wonderfully how when Hiranyaksh is defeated by the Lord, Hiranyakashipu goes into a belligerent anger phase. And he's searching for Lord Vishnu, and in his search, he enters the abode of Lord Vishnu. And it says that this is where the Lord is thinking that wherever I go, Hiranyakashipu will follow me, as death follows all living entities. Therefore, it is better for me to enter the core of his heart, for then, because of his power to see only externally, he will not see me. So we know that the Lord is present in the form of Chaitya Guru, in the form of Paramatma, in everybody's heart. But when our consciousness is clouded by greed, selfishness, false ego, we are not able to perceive the presence of the Supreme Personality of Lord um, in our heart as our Chaitya Guru. In that particular scenario, in this example, Srila Prabhupada goes on to describe in the purport, when the Lord decided to enter the heart of Hiranyakashipu so that he would externally be invisible to him, is not because the Lord was afraid of Hiranyakashipu or he was trying to find a place to hide from him, but the Lord was very, very anxious for the deliverance of Hiranyakashipu. Whenever somebody's child is in danger, we are very anxious to help them. We find out different ways, different means to help them. And with this particular thought process, the Supreme Personality of God had also thought, how can I help this demon, who's just going and committing one sin after another sin? What is the best way I can do that? And in order to help him understand, or at least encourage him in some way, the Lord enters his heart and manifests in the core of his heart. So that externally, he is not able to see the Lord, although he doesn't realize that internally the Lord is with him. Now, many times people from other faiths, they fail to understand the concept of avatar. If you see different schools of religion in Christianity, in Islam, um, that this concept of the Lord or the supreme power descending from his own abode into the earthly realm is not something that they can easily digest. It does not, it does not concur with what's mentioned in their text. So in this particular in this particular reasoning, there was a wonderful story by that happens in with Akbar. Akbar also, had questioned one of his ministers, as Birbal, about this fact that how can Lord, come to this material realm when he's so powerful? He could just do everything from sitting up there. Why does he need to come here? So to help Akbar understand this, Birbal, as if you're familiar with the stories, Birbal sets up a plan. He tells Akbar and his family are going on like a voyage on a ship, and Akbar's grandson is also there. And Birbal tells the maid servant who's taking care of the grandson that I want you to leave the grandson aside in somebody else's care and just take a piece of rock and wrap it up in a cloth like it's a child. And just when Akbar is watching you, when you're on the ship deck, just by mistake trip and drop that piece of rock and cloth into the water. So this is what happens. Akbar is watching the maid servant and he's thinking about his grandson, and all of a sudden she trips and drops the stone wrapped up in a cloth which looks like the grandson into the water. As soon as Akbar sees it, he immediately jumps from the ship, goes and tries to rescue that, and realizes, oh, this is not the grandson, just the cloth, and comes back up. And then he gets furious at this prank, and so Birbal confronts him and says, Jhapana, why did you do this? It was, and he said, I was scared because I thought this is my grandson. She normally takes care of my grandson and she dropped it in the water. So I jumped to save him. But Birbal said that you had so many guards, so many soldiers in the ship. Why didn't you just order one of them to jump? Why did you have to jump? And Akbar said, no, he's so dear to me. I couldn't even think about, the another way that somebody I would couldn't even think of waiting for a moment before I could help him. So in that particular way, Birbal explains that's the same philosophy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, that when he sees his particular living entity in anxiety and distress, the Lord himself appears into this world in order to deliver that person. So with the same understanding, when Lord Vishnu saw that Hiranyakashipu was committing one sin after another sin and so much enraged in anger, Lord Vishnu decided to enter the heart of Hiranyakashipu. With this, we move on to text 10. In text 10, again, we understand the same principle of how Lord Vishnu's anxiety was not out of particular fear, but was out of compassion for Hiranyakashipu. Now, it's interesting in text 11 and 12 that Hiranyakashipu, he was looking for the Lord everywhere, not realizing that the Lord is present in his own heart. And with this analogy, we sometimes, with this example, we sometimes should understand and reflect that oftentimes when we chant, and if we are inattentive while in our chanting, we may try to understand God, try to look for God in different things we do, but actually the Lord Himself is present in the holy name. And in this holy name, He's completely present in His full potency and full manifestation. But if we are not chanting with sincerity, we will not be able to appreciate that the Lord is so close to us, standing right in front of us, like Srila Rupa Goswami describes, dancing on our tongue when we chant the pure name of the Lord. In such particular way, Hiranyakashipu was looking for Lord everywhere, but he couldn't find him. And when he couldn't find him, he came to this conclusion that I have searched the entire universe and I couldn't find Lord Vishnu, so he must be dead. And this is the atheistic principle. Atheists believe that there is no law God in this world, or even if God is there, then he must have died, just like everything else dies in this world. But they don't understand that according to what we understand from Bhagavad Gita, that neither God dies nor does the living entity die, because the soul can never be killed. So this people who do not have this particular understanding, they're called atheists, and they have this such kind of principle. Now, oftentimes when we see in Krishna Lila as well, at the end of Krishna Lila, when Lord has to wrap up his pastimes and leave the Bhumandal, then, we see this particular description that a hunter shoots an arrow and the arrow goes and hits the toenail of the Lord. And with that, the Lord gives up from what the atheists describe it that as the Lord dies at that point. But anybody knows from common sense, just with an arrow hitting a toe of a person, is not enough to cause a life-threatening bleeding that the person will die. So the Lord plays this trick just to satisfy the atheist that he died in sort of a material way. But even if you apply some common sense, you will understand that that's not possible. And as when we understand from devotees, being practicing devotees, that the Lord actually doesn't have a material body, first of all, and secondly, he just chooses that particular moment to end his leela and disappear from this material world back into the spiritual world. It's not that he dies or gives up his body, but he just chooses out of his own free will to end his particular leela at that time. And the only place where you cannot return from, because Hiranyakashipu says he must have been dead and goes to a place he cannot return from. Prabhupada states that the only place you cannot return from is actually the spiritual world. Because yad gatvatna nivartante tad dhama paramam mama. One who completely realizes the fallacy of this material world and the potency of the spiritual world, or the purity of Krishna Prem, doesn't return to take back birth again into this material world. That's the only place where we don't have to return from. In text 13, very briefly, I'll just summarize in the next couple of minutes. Hiranyakashipu's anger persisted even after Lord Vishnu's death. Others in the bodily concept of life maintain anger only because of false ego and the great influence of ignorance. Now, this is a very important barometer. You may have heard me saying this before, but it's important that we have certain barometers in bhakti in our own spiritual practice. We should question ourselves whether we are advancing each year. Every year we are practicing bhakti. Am I becoming more attached to the holy name? Am I becoming more detached to gossiping? Am I being able to control my anger and influence? Srila Prabhupada states in this particular purport that usually the duration of somebody's anger is directly correlating to the duration to their degree of ignorance, the degree of false ego. So we should realize that even though we are practicing devotees and we may still get angry at some point, we should quickly be able to check ourselves and break out of that cycle of anger and be able to handle that situation in a more amicable fashion. But if we're not able to do that, but if we maintain a grudge, maintain anger with a particular devotee, a particular family member, and we keep that on for 1, 2, 3 days, 1 week, 2 weeks, that should help us realize how much ignorance we are in. What is our degree of ignorance? And Prabhupada comments in this purport that Hiranyakashipu was so full of ignorance that he bore this anger all the way until Lord Nrsimha Dev appeared. And because of this degree of ignorance, there was no other way for the Lord to deliver him other than to appear as Lord Nrsimha Dev and deliver him in that fashion. In text 14 and 15, goes on to describe Prahlad Maharaj's son. I tried to find references to it and I found a couple references. They were quoting Chandogya Upanishad, in which it was mentioned, and Srila Prabhupada mentions also in some purports in Bhagavatam, that Sri Prahlad Maharaj had 4 sons. In one place he says, the oldest was Virochana. And at one point, what had happened is both Virochana and Indra were interested in acquiring spiritual knowledge. So they go to Prajapati and they acquire spiritual knowledge from him, although they both come to different conclusions based on that knowledge. But even then that, Virochan, who's Prahlad Maharaj's son and Bali Maharaj's father, he is known to be very respectful towards Brahmana. So he had a particular article. One had mentioned a crown, which was sort of protecting his life. But when the Brahmanas or the Devatas approached to him in the form of Brahmanas, even though he knew that this may not be in his favor, he was willing to give that charity to the Devatas in the form of Brahmanas. In this particular way, the Lord is setting the scene of how Bali Maharaj belongs to such an exalted family, glorifying him, glorifying his family, glorifying the attributes of a Kshatriya, and in this particular way, setting the scene so he can, when he asks for those 3 tracts of land, when he asks for this particular charity, Bali Maharaj doesn't backtrack on his words. With this, we'll end our discussion today. Thank you, devotees, for your kind attention. Grantharaj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda ki jai, Shri Prabhupada ki jai. Hare Krishna.
Thank you very much, Prabhuji. Hare Thank you so much, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.